that movement from dancing, it's like energetic, right? It gets your energy up, and you feel it probably maybe increases your confidence because you're putting yourself out there. You're making yourself vulnerable to not just one person, but multiple groups of people. And maybe you're dancing with other people, and all that's building up your energy and your confidence.
Welcome back to the Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, Jose, your hosts, get to talk about out of the box ideas. Today, we actually have a topic about movement, and this is really it's comes from the idea of how movement is important in our lives. Why is movement needed, and why do we start to atrophy when we stop using certain muscles? And so, before we actually get started, I want to invite y'all to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned to the next videos that we have coming up. We're really looking forward to having more guests in our podcast. Um, we have a couple people lined up who are coming in to our podcast soon. So hopefully you can stay tuned and not miss them. But without further ado, um, Steele, I have this idea of how movement, is something important in people's lives, right? And you always hear that the doctors say like, hey, 30 minutes of exercise is important for the body to stay healthy. And it's so interesting that when people start to exercise, not only do they reduce the amount of cortisol, right? The stress hormones. It reduces that amount. Um, but maybe perhaps due to that, people start thinking clear, people start calculating much faster. And it's almost as if, you know, uh exercising can lead to better mental capacity, right?
Yeah.
Just because if somebody's stressed and they never have a way to release it, perhaps maybe just showering or something like that is the only way to calm down or to relax, or maybe watching a show or something like that, comedy show. But sometimes nowadays with the virtual world that we live in, so easy to just stay stuck in one place and not really do any movement. So what do you think about like the idea of movement, perhaps exercise, that because I say movement because we could consider, walking or moving, or sometimes even at work where people have to do labor, right? That's considered form of movement exercise. So how do our movements help, our health? And then later we can move on to what do our movements tell, right? What our movements tell about us? So do
Yeah.
you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah. So we could frame it like movements give us some form of exercise, and exercise strengthens our muscles, and our bodies are made up of different proteins and chemicals, and they all work together. Of course, made of atoms and all that stuff, cells, and all of that works together to form us and who we are right now, physically and mentally. And our brain is also made of physical things, proteins, chemicals, and all that stuff too. So everything from our muscles to every tissue in our body and our brain and works together in unison based on our physical health, and how our physical health is going through, it can affect our mental health, right? And vice versa. Our mental health can sometimes affect our physical health, like with stress. Increased cortisol hormone from stress can decrease our immune system function. So yeah, it's all connected. That's the main thing. And so I do think that movement and exercise, if that is tied to an increase in physical health, then that would be a tied to an increase in mental health. And we do know that research does show and indicate that exercise does improve mental health and is more likely to decrease things like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. Like we've seen that through research. And so we know most people who exercise are going to have better mental health, right? And so we know that. And so if you have bad health, like drugs or not exercising, not moving, then you could be maybe perhaps more likely, knowing all of this, to have maybe poor mental health, more depression, more anxiety, more physical health problems like heart problems and different things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think it all ties together. Yeah,
Yeah, it's so interesting that, our whole body is interconnected, and it's, if one area of our body is not functioning well, it can essentially lead to other problems in the body, right? It's like a chain reaction.
exactly.
But if you fix it, if you help the body heal, then that essentially starts to heal other things as well. But so interesting how there's studies about how, people standing in an upright position for some time, or standing in a position of power for a certain amount of time, it also raises their self-confidence.
That makes sense.
It's so interesting how, putting your body, moving your body in a position, or at least walking in a position of perhaps power, or a position of openness, right? Of grandeur. It can
Yeah,
make the body feel that way, make it
yeah.
feel
And
great.
when we know, like as communication majors, crossing your arms, it makes you seem defensive, right? And all of that stuff is communicated non-verbally, and we know that smiling, I think there's a study that showed that people who smile more tend to feel happier, and it kind of gets contagious with other people, right? And so,
Yeah.
and from a filmmaking, just bringing all of the different fields that we study together as people who love to study multiple things, filmmaking perspective, you're right, because like the filmmakers love to do the camera angle looking up when they want someone to look like they're powerful, like they're scary, like they're intimidating, like they're an authority figure. Because that, like you said, like when someone's standing taller, they feel more powerful. So when someone's watching a movie and the camera angle's looking up to someone, they look and they perceive them as more powerful. And then in filmmaking, you want to film below, like from down, and make someone look inferior by filming like to make them look like they're lower. So it's interesting. So even with that,
Yeah.
it's very interesting how that ties together.
Yeah, that's so cool that yeah, even in film they try to highlight those aspects of the body, right? Aspects of making it look bigger or more authoritative, right?
Uh,
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I even think about it like while dancing, you know, the movements of dance, they a lot of people like to go dancing because their body feels great. They have Zumba classes and, these dance workouts that help, um, just make you feel better, or make you get this rush of energy where you feel great about yourself,
yep,
right? There could be various things going on wrong, but if your body feels great, you're you almost correlate that with your emotional state being great, and then your mental state being great. So it's almost like I said earlier, I said it earlier in the opposite aspect, that if your body is hurting, or there's an area that hurts, it's almost like a chain reaction where it like leads to other aspects. um but it's so interesting how it can lead to psychological aspects too. How you were saying depression, all these like anxieties, and it starts sometimes from the body, like
yeah,
how we perceive the world, um and how we communicate with the world, right? So a lot of people say like 90% of communication can be communicated through the body, the rest can be communicated through words. And so that gives you something to think about, right? Because now it's not just your words speaking, but your body speaking. So once you become aware of that, it's like, oh wow, this is not just a mouth that's here. It's a whole human body person, communicating. And so I like to really pay attention to people when I'm talking to them. Um
mhm,
how they move, how they stand when I'm talking to them. And yeah, it really tells me a lot about what's going on in their mind, right? For example, if somebody I'm talking to is just keeps turning away and kind of not looking at me in the eye, makes me think that they're not paying attention, right? It's like it's not important, it's not something that they want to hear. They're just there to, say hi, and they didn't want to talk that much. And it's like, oh, okay. But if you see somebody that's, kind of leaning in a little bit and kind of making eye contact, um, it makes you think like, oh, okay, they're actually interested in what they're saying. And so that movement that they're having of interest is showing in their body, right? Because they're leaning in a little bit just to kind of hear you a little bit more, perhaps. Um,
Yeah, we rely on that so much all the time, and maybe we don't realize it. Especially if you're going on like on a date, like you're probably relying more on nonverbal communication because you want to figure out, is this person interested in me, right? I mean,
yeah.
uh,
And maybe sometimes we might look at it more than we have to, right? Maybe
yeah,
we we
perception,
start to overanalyze,
overthink,
right? But
perception.
exactly, like, "Oh, okay, they smiled. Does that mean they like me?"
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
You know? And so,
Or we start
it's
overthinking, like they don't like me, right? Or we think, oh, they did this, so maybe they don't like me, when maybe they were being shy.
yeah,
Misinterpretation.
that's true. That's true, but, you know, I I wonder, if you work out before a date, how would that go?
Oh,
Because you have a rush of energy, you have, like, more endorphins in your body. Because I think about that when somebody goes out dancing, like, when I go dancing, I'm, enjoying, having a good time. Then I talk to people. I mean, most of the time I wanna be dancing, but, when I do talk to, for example, girls afterwards or something, there's more of a confidence aspect that I feel weirdly enough, right? Perhaps because I've been dancing with them, but but yeah, it's something that I've noticed. There's like a rush of self confidence.
yeah, I bet it does, cause like, that movement from dancing, it's, like, energetic, right? It gets your energy up, and you feel it probably maybe increases your confidence because you're putting yourself out there, you're making yourself vulnerable to not just one person, but multiple groups of people, and maybe you're dancing with other people, and all that's building up your energy and your confidence, and
Yeah,
so you're going in with that mindset. It's almost like a mindset that you're getting from dancing, and then you're taking that into dating, I guess, to talking to someone. And so I feel like, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. Even I recently went to a wedding this past weekend, and the uncle of the bride, we talked while we were preparing for the wedding. We were helping bring ice chests and all this stuff, right? And during the day of the party or like the wedding, we went to the wedding, and everything was great. And then we go to the party and they start playing the music. And of course I love to dance, and I started dancing with different friends of mine. And then the uncle, he was like, "Man, you're such a player. Like you're dancing with all the girls and this and that." And it was almost like another side that he didn't see coming, because I guess when I talked with him, he thought I was more like a calm, you know, shy kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
Which is sometimes like what I feel like people might perceive, like more like introspective, more introverted. But when I'm in the dance floor, it's like completely extroverted person. Like that's where my extrovertedness comes out. Dance, I have a lot of energy and it makes me want to do another song. So after every song, I have like this rush of energy to do another song. So, it almost works backwards where most people like will get tired after dancing several songs. For me, it's like the opposite. Like I have more energy as I dance more. So so it's kind of interesting that can happen, and like the perspective of what people see in you can change due to the movement that you carry with your body, right?
It's true. I think it definitely does. because how are other people perceiving you when you're dancing? They're probably maybe if you're a good dancer, they're perceiving you as confident, someone who puts themselves out there. So definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Really interesting. So interesting how a movement can communicate that. Um,
And nonverbals, even just thinking about that for a second, like when you see someone on crutches, you see someone in a wheelchair or any other disabilities, you start making assumptions in your mind right away. Like, has this person always been on crutches? You might assume that they spent their whole life that way, when maybe in reality it's just a temporary injury. Or you might assume like if someone's in a wheelchair that I don't know, like they're shy and reserved. Maybe I'm just making stuff up, but maybe, like, different things come to your mind, and you haven't even said a single word to them, and they haven't said a single word to you. Or
yeah.
maybe, like, you're an atheist and you see someone wearing a cross necklace, and you start making assumptions about stereotypes in your mind about them, and then you haven't even said anything to them, you don't even know who they are, and you
Mm.
start thinking, "Oh, well, maybe they believe this or that," when in reality, they might not, and so it's interesting how we can form these ideas about people without even saying a single word to them. So,
Yeah,
like, a lot of people think nonverbal is just movement, but it's also appearance.
yeah, that makes me think of, when people like do prayovers, right? Like they extend their hand. That's so interesting. Why isn't it just necessary to just pray for them verbally? Why do you need to raise your hand? What is it about feeling the presence of somebody else like in our hands, right? Um the energy, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, from
Like
a philosophical.
even when people pray, like the regular pose of like prayer, which is putting two hands together
Yeah,
like near
it's
your
always with the
heart, right?
yeah, it's
Like
always with the
near,
hands.
yeah. It's almost like, like when you pray, you're you're putting your hands together, and if you notice, it's pointing up,
Yep.
right? So prayer in a way is, taking what's in your heart, you know, what sinks into your from your mind to your heart to the infinite, to what we call God, right? But it's so interesting how those different movements, you know, are so powerful. Like there's a difference between praying, you know, with your hands up, then with your hands here in your chest, then with your hands down, you know,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
then with your hands back. Like, why don't you just put
I
your hands back and pray like that?
I never thought about
Like what is so special about putting your hands together,
I remember when I was
right?
yeah, I remember being a kid in Sunday school and wondering that, like, I wonder how that where that came from, I remember, like, contemplating, like, where did the idea of this come from for praying, you know? But that's
Yeah.
it's kinda interesting how you pointed out, like, the brain to the heart and it's pointing up, and then when you're praying for someone, you're pointing towards them. So, it's like you could think, like, I don't know, like, strange philosophy and go outside the box and start thinking about strange things like, well, maybe it's like transference of energy, or your hand is where you direct your energy from your mind, from your intention to the universe and to God. Your hand is like the I don't know, pointing and, like, transferring the energy in the direction that it's pointing. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
kinda thinking
But
that's
it's interesting that you mentioned that because there's this saying that says where your heart is, that's where your treasure is as well,
what does that mean?
right? And so what that means is like where your heart is, like where you put your passion, where you direct yourself to, that's where your treasure is, right? Like if you direct yourself towards, you know, I don't know, the beauty of music, and you are passionate about music, right? Then that's where your treasure is, right? That's what that's the treasure that points you to the infinite, to God, right? Or perhaps not. Maybe it's just a finite idea for some people. And it's just, the basic fundamental of music. Or perhaps some people put their treasure and their focus on making more money, and becoming rich, and that's their focus, right? And so I definitely think that since we're directional beings, right, we always we're sort of like linear. We think about things linearly, like our time, how we're linear.
Oh,
in
yes.
time. So in a specific moment, we have to go in a certain direction. We can't go backwards and forwards at the same time, So we have to go directionally. And so our movement has to be directional, right? There's only one way we can go at a certain time in space, right?
Right,
And so I think about our eye movement, how it like focuses on different things, like where you focus, that's kind of where you kind of want to go, right? Like you
desire.
won't go talk to a girl if you don't see her,
Right.
right? And so your eyes are constantly like observing and looking for where to go, right?
What you want. Yeah.
I mean, I also think about those people who are blind and how
Yeah, the
how
same.
they move through life,
Yeah.
because I know this musician that's really amazing. I've been listening to him. His name is Noel Panisi, and he's a folklorico singer. He's blind, but he has an amazing voice, which has compensated for the lack of his musical ability has compensated for the lack of vision that he has, or natural vision. But he can see with his soul, like different things, different musical notes that people who do have eyesight cannot see, because they've balanced themselves out with their other senses. But since he doesn't have sight, he just, you know, sees and speaks from the soul of his heart, or it's so interesting how he's also one directional, because he's a human being, but it comes from a different direction, right? And I don't know if I'm making sense in that sense, but yes, so our eyesight tells us where to go. And for him, since he doesn't have eyes necessarily or can't see, um he is moved by the eyes of his heart, right? What he feels, what he thinks he sees in the world, right? And so that's what moves him, right? The laughing of people, the joy of people screaming for a goal when the soccer game starts, or when the soccer game is going on.
And
Um,
auditory, yeah, auditory.
the auditory movement, and I guess in a way, all of our senses in a way create a sense of movement, right?
Yeah,
Because we hear something, maybe let's say, for example, we hear somebody break into our house. We hear
yeah,
them, and then we're like, oh, what is that? And so we go, that starts the movement of our body,
that's a
which leads to, like seeing somebody there. You're like, oh, let me grab a bat, right? And
yeah,
then
and
you feel
exactly,
you feel afraid, maybe, and so that's what causes certain movement to happen. And so if you think
yeah,
about it, where we go and where we are at the moment has to do really with how we have perceived the world through our five senses.
I
And
agree.
that's where we have moved to be at this point today.
And I wonder if blind people, after you said all that, if blind people can perceive nonverbals, but if nonverbals can be perceived just with auditory senses, like maybe you could perceive someone's wearing a jacket by the way the sounds of their movement, and you can perceive whether someone's using crutches by the sounds of crutches. So it's like, yeah, I bet you could still like have nonverbals even if someone's blind, kind of.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I have heard of people who are blind developing almost like bat senses, like
yeah, for the yeah.
where they can, with the vibrations of sound and stuff like that, they can sense where things are around them.
Yeah, like Daredevil.
Yeah, sort of like that, but like real life
Yeah,
daredevils.
exactly.
It's so cool. Yeah, and, I saw it in a video of this kid who he would ride his bike. He would do normal things just like every other kid, but he would do them using the vibrations he would feel from the ground, from the sounds bouncing off. It's almost like yeah, like the bats, the creatures, using uh echolocation to know where things are, and that's what would create their their movement.
Yeah, that is really interesting. How it all
Uh,
comes.
yeah, it's kind of cool how to think about it in that format, that where we are right now is only a byproduct of what we have perceived and
Yeah,
what we have experienced from our senses, because that has created the movement, right? you know when I went to look for universities, not only was I curious, right? I had heard of different schools which created the movement. Well, while I was there was also the experimental aspect of feeling like, hey, is this the right fit for me, right? Is this where I want to go to school? And eventually, due to that, was what led me to go to a certain school, right? I used, my my mind saying like, oh, okay, this is a great school. I've heard a lot of good things about it. You know, they've told me great things about it, and then I talked to the professors. They seem to all be really interesting, and I've come 2 or 3 times already, and I just have this feeling inside of me that gives me peace about it, and that led to me enrolling, right? That was the movement that came out of me. You know, we a movement can also be a decision, right? We confirm a decision and we choose to go forward with it. And you know how it's interesting, that phrasing, go forward with it. A lot of people use it when they're in sales. They're selling something. They're like, do you want to go move forward with this, right?
yeah,
They and it's interesting that they say move forward, as in like this is a direction that I want to go to into,
yeah,
like moving forward. It's a movement. Not they could say, "Do you want to buy this or do you want to experience this?" Maybe, but they say sometimes move forward with it.
yeah,
So I think that in itself is very interesting.
yeah. It's also been adopted in language as well. Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah. So, any last thoughts, Steele?
I just know that this has inspired a topic for another podcast because I was coming up. I was thinking about a theory philosophically about whether movement, whether the universe can exist without movement and time, and how time relates to movement and vice versa. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna write that down.
Yeah, I think it would be definitely interesting to think about how atoms move. Why don't they just stay still?
Yeah, because I don't think
Right?
yeah, because I don't think time. My theory was I don't think time can exist without movement.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's up to debate.
It's perhaps the energy that propels time to exist. Maybe you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, it's a weird
It's
relation.
almost like they have to both be coexistent with
Yeah,
each other in order to happen. Right? You can't have time without movement. And can't have movement without time.
exactly. It's such a strange mystery.
You can't move in a timeless zone unless you perhaps live in another dimension
Yeah.
that's not
Relation.
um, constructed within time.
Yeah, that's true.
But in our reality, I think we need both time and movement. It's almost like a graph, right? Like you need
Exactly.
time and movement to create a line. Otherwise, if you just have um movement, like the bottom line movement, it's just a straight line. You don't have time, and so it's not. It's like you can't move. It's gonna stay in
Yeah,
the same position,
exactly.
right? So in order for it to move, you need to have both both at the same time.
Yeah, because if there's no movement, no time has passed because the only way we measure time is off of movement. right? I mean,
Yeah.
so that's yeah, it's weird.
But is staying still perhaps movement in
Yeah,
itself?
that's weird. If you pause the universe and there's no movement at all, then is time still passing? You know?
Yeah, because you're still breathing. You're like a lot of things are still going on without you thinking. So even if you freeze or stay still, there's your atoms are vibrating.
Yeah.
Things are still going on.
But even
Yeah,
if you paused all the atoms too, and you paused literally everything that's
like
moving.
if you freeze someone, like in like how they say Walt Disney is frozen and
Yeah.
or
But
something
I
like
mean,
that. Like
like even like a thought experiment, like you literally like not freeze, but you make everything in the universe, all atoms, everything stop moving at once. Does that
yeah,
mean time ceases to be? I don't know. That's
and I also think about this like if you freeze, does that slow down the process of decay?
I don't
Is
know.
movement is movement causing us to decay?
That's a good question. Yeah, because we know that the only reason we have old age and die is because of the telomeres at the end of our DNA. So but I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question actually.
Yeah. Well, all great questions for the next upcoming podcast. We really appreciate everyone staying on, listening to our podcast about movement. Let us know what you thought was interesting down below in the comments section, and also subscribe to our channel because we are definitely committed to um, providing greater content for you guys. So I hope you can move forward with that subscription, and we will see you soon. Take care.